So this week we have a bit of a combo. We've got some Fallout and some terrain work with the crashed UFO. So Modifius actually makes a resin version of this as well as selling the STL. This is the STL file that I've printed myself. Came out pretty good. This was printed on my E10 5K from ePax. All the riveting is very nicely shown on here. There are some whorls on the layering here. Nothing too terrible though. I did have a couple issues. You can kind of see a seam here. I think this is where I had refilled the resin without pausing it, so it kind of disturbed the layer line. It did separate here, but I've already gap filled that with some putty and run sanding over it so it's nice and smooth. When I removed the supports, it also punched a couple holes, so I filled those. I've sanded this one. This one I'm leaving pretty much as it is because that's just a rocky surface, so it'll be fine. As you can see, it's already hollowed out since it sits flat, and that means all of the support damaging, all of the pieces in here, that's all fine and won't be seen, and also it means you won't use as much resin. That being said, this did use about I'd say 500 milliliters, so half of a 1 kilogram bottle or so. But it's got some very nice detail work on it and should look pretty good once I get it painted. For priming on my 3D stuff, I like to use this Rust-Oleum self-etching primer. Oh, actually, did I grab the wrong stuff? Normally I try and get the gap filling stuff, and this should do the bit, but normally there is a gap filler one, which looks like I grabbed the wrong one from the shelf, but we'll see. This should be fine. But yeah, so we will see how that does. So we'll get it primed and then come back. Most of this is going to be done using the airbrush. So like all of the UFO surface will be airbrushed one color, then we'll pick out some of the other pieces in different colors with a brush, and we'll brush the rubble, and we'll do that in tau ochre to kind of match what we've done before. But let's get this primed and see how it goes. Okay, as we can see, primer's gone on nicely. We can still see that vague line there, but our corner has blended nicely. This little bump there, but I can deal with that. Big problem with sanding it is it's right in this circular region, so it's pretty hard to get to. And then, like I said, the piece on the back here you wouldn't even be able to tell because it's blended in with the rocks. So that all looks quite good. So for the base on this, we're going to go ahead and go with the Citadel Air Leadbelcher to give us that darker metallic, and then we'll apply some highlights afterwards using a brighter metal. So let me go ahead and warm up my airbrush and we'll get to it. so as we can see, we've got a nice metallic base down on that. You can see a little bit of damage to the print in the back that's starting to show up now. We can still see like the whorls of the layer lines here, but nothing too terrible. If I really wanted to, I could go in here with my little sander and kind of take those out and then reprime it and go over it, but I'm happy with the way it is. I have this little electric sander I use. As you can see, even with as small as it is, it'd be a little difficult in there, and I'd be worried about knocking those rivet lines down. So these rivets are pretty sensitive. I already kind of killed a couple on this side. I made sure to get up under the lip, and then the little wing bit here is like that, which I think I'm supposed to have another wing here. I'll have to go back and look at my pattern, because I didn't remember seeing that in the download, but it definitely has a slot, which will be easy enough to paint and add later. So I'll just worry about this piece for now as part of our tutorial. So now we need to go ahead and go with a lighter metal, providing I can figure out where I put it. I think I have an aluminum here. Nope, that's a gun gray. It's a gold. The joys of not cleaning up after yourself. What I'm gonna go ahead and use is, I have a Runefang steel. It's a layer, but that just means I'll add additional mixing with my flow improver to water it down enough to use. And I'm just going to focus on the tops here and kind of the edges a bit with this lighter shade. Alright, now that we've got the basic metallics down, you can kind of see the slight shading difference between now the central fuselage and the central disc area. We're going to go ahead and let it dry a bit. I want to make sure those colors set nicely, and then we'll come back, we'll start working on the rocks and the dirt that it's dug into, and we're also going to be picking out various pieces like the viewports, the cockpit looking area there. That'll all get turned into like our glass looking areas, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I did a bit of quick research. I'm going to go ahead and apply another metallic coat over this, but this time I'm going to use Grey Knight Steel. It has a bit of a bluish tinge to it, and that seems more in line with how it looks in the game. And I did confirm there is another wing piece that will go here, as well as an engine piece that goes here. So I'm going to print those up and have them. The engine piece especially I'm going to paint separately, simply because it will then hang off the back and cover up this. It'll enable me to paint everything around it easier. And it's going to be a completely different color, whereas this wing will actually match in, so I just have to make sure to duplicate the coloring I've done when I do that. But let's go ahead and apply that blue and see how it looks. Alright, so that gave it a nice bluish tinge now on the metallic, so that'll look good. Once again, we're just going to let this dry now, and then I'm going to start picking out these viewports and do them in kind of a yellow, which is what they look like in game. The back piece here will come out as like a reddish metallic, so I'm going to try mixing up some red with like a copper, something like that, and see how it looks. And I will apply some washes to like these deeper sections to kind of darken them in, which is why I tried not to hit them too much with the blue. I wanted to keep the base metals in those groupings, and we'll see how that looks. Alright, so we're going to get started on doing the cockpit and the side windows, so we're going to need to base those first. So I'm going to do a Wraithbone base, and then we'll go over it with yellow after. Now, this section right here is also a part of the front cockpit that you don't really see. There's some actual digital renders online you can see of this, and so like he's got an entire view screen around the front that's all covered by this rocks, so we'll be getting that little bit of yellow as well. Alright, so as we can see, got the basing done for what will be our yellow cockpit kind of windows and everything. So we're going to go ahead and let that dry a little bit, and then we'll be back with some contrast yellow to go over it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and apply our contrast yellow to see how this comes out. Normally I think I'd do a blue for the view screens and everything, but with the blue tinge of the metal, I think it'll be better to try the yellow. So let's just see how it looks in the small section here first. Okay, I think that looks fine, so we'll go ahead and do the rest and see how we do. Okay, so we've got our viewports all done in, and I think that yellow on the blue metallic really does have a nice contrast, so I think that'll look good. Next we're going to look at doing some potential weathering. This damage on the print itself, I'm going to try and turn that into actual more damage. I'm also going to take and use some very light airbrushing of black to do scorch marks. And we're going to take some brown and kind of streak it as if it had kind of picked up some pieces and whatnot. So I'll let this dry, and then we'll break out our washes and see what we get. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and do some quick airbrush work with just some black. So we're just going to apply some streaking basically with it to represent kind of like the engines in the back here. Alright, so as you can see, we just kind of feathered that over, and it's really added a bit of, scorch marks there, so I think that looks pretty good. Coming out of here, like this is almost an air brake section or a thruster. Same with all of this, so that all looks good. Our next is going to be to work a little bit of damage. We want to know why this fell out of the sky. So in doing this, I'm going to take a small dry brush, and I'm going to take some just regular black, and what I'm going to do is kind of patch black spots around where the damage I've got on this is. And what that's going to let me do is I'll then apply some orange into it, like it's scorch marks, that kind of thing. So we're going to go ahead and first apply our black and go from there. And we're treating this like a dry brush, so I'm just kind of wiping most of this off, and then we will apply some. So you see we've got this all kind of focused on the one side here. So now what we're going to do is just take some bright orange. In this case we're using Army Painter Lava Orange. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and use the same technique, but we're going to focus on a smaller area within the black. So what I'm going to do, while this was a larger dry brush, I've kind of cut it down. I'm going to be using just this corner of it to apply the orange. So we're going to go ahead and give that a start and see what we can do. Okay, so you can see here, got some nice battle damage going on there. Enough to have brought this scout out of the sky at least. So that looks good. And it'll help blend in, like I said, and work with the slight damage that was in that area. So now we're going to go ahead and take some washes. I've got my Nuln oil here. And we're going to apply this into the recesses, so these sort of sections here real quick, just to kind of give them a shade difference and separate the two from each other. Okay, so that applied a bit of shading in a couple areas. Now the next thing we're going to do is apply some brown, and we're going to do this pretty heavily, and then we're going to be applying and wiping to cause some streaking. So we're going to be doing that pretty quickly, so just apply and wipe, apply and wipe. So now that this is all kind of settled into the recesses, and we'll build up a nice patina. You see in all the edging and around the riveting and into the gaps. So that'll look really good. What we're going to do then is wait for all of the washes to dry, and then we'll go ahead and finish up the rest of this by applying our dirt and rubble around the ship. Okay, so we're going to start working on the various rock and ground pieces now. Rather than going straight to our towelite ochre, I have this yellow ochre from Vallejo Air, which is a very similar, a little bit lighter color, but good enough for us to get the bulk of it done without having to worry about brushing. Alright, so that's our initial coat of yellow down. Pretty good on the overspray, so we don't have to worry about cleaning anything up. Next up, we'll go ahead and take our regular towelite ochre and just kind of apply it over the top of this, just to bring it in line color-wise. Then we'll pick out any rocks in gray, and then we'll worry about doing a brown wash over the rest of it. So we're just going to apply our towelite ochre now. Just loading up this nice big brush. And we're pretty much just trying to blend this in with the other in order to bring the color in line. Okay, as we can see, we got that light ochre in there nicely. really up the color a bit. I'm really starting to see that crashed into the dirt feel. So next we're going to go ahead and break out one of our grays, and we're going to start picking out the rocks. So for this, I'm going to, as soon as I can find it, use there my Necromancer Cloak. And we're just going to be hitting the larger rocks to pick those out. So as you can see, we've got our rocks picked out, so that's kind of giving us a little detail work on all the dirt and just kind of giving us some extra color as opposed to all just the yellow dirt color I use. So now we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to come back and just kind of slather it with our favorite Agrax Earthshade. Alright, so we're just going to apply our Agrax Earthshade real quick. Get our base color here standing out. We're not going to worry too much about getting it into the model itself because we can just clean that up as we go, with the exception of around the cockpit kind of areas here. I want to try and make sure I don't get those too bad. As you can see, you can just come by and just suck it up with the brush once it's got enough out. So this is just a real quick application. We can already see it picks out those details on the dirt very nicely. suck up the pooled, apply it back to the top. Okay. Alright, so we will just let that dry, and then we'll do some dry brushing of the stones, but then we'll be pretty much done with the exception of the additional parts I have to print and add. So as we can see, we are all done with the crashed UFO. I've sealed it at this point. The only additional parts I did was I completed the engine piece. This was painted exactly how, this and the extra wing that I had to attach were painted the exactly same way. So I started off with Leadbelcher air, well, black primer, Leadbelcher air, and then a bit of a highlight of the bluish steel that I used, which is Grey Knight steel. Then I attached the wing, and due to its bendy structure I used a rubber band basically to hold it in place while it dried so that it's nice and solid in there. Then I just applied Agrax Earthshade and wiped it off a bit, so as you can see it blends in perfectly well with the rest of it. For the engine, what I did was I airbrushed some contrast Flesh Terrors red, and when you apply the contrast over metallic, the metallic usually bleeds through, especially when you're using the airbrush. I like using the airbrush for this because you see you got a very nice smooth coat to it, and you still have that nice metallic kind of shining through, which it looks really good for the end of the spaceship. There's a bit of frosting from where I sealed it, but that's okay. But yep, as you can see, all done. So just to give you some sense of scale, here is a Minuteman. So as you can tell, this thing is super large on the tabletop. So it will take up a nice big piece. So get your Zetans painted up, and I'm looking forward to getting this on the table myself.